All right, I believe we're live now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Negated. It's OG Justin. It's been so long since we
Beautiful.
did any sort of video, and today I thought we'd do something a little casual. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna talk about Australia with a good friend of ours. He's here with us. He's very short. There's Mario right here. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna do a little talking, and I'm here with none other than T here. You probably remember him from the last stream. Yes, very cool, very epic. And T, go ahead and introduce our guests today. Who do we have here with us today?
Oh, yeah, sure thing. So today we have a very special guest. He's a friend of the Negated channel, living in Australia right now. He gets to experience everything going on there firsthand, and as many of you know, Justin promised an Australia video part 2, and this fine gentleman has offered his hope in that. We thought, what better than to have him here live calling into the studio. Anyways, he goes by the name of AustrianAdam. If you watched the last Australia video, much of the footage presented was transferred over to us through him, and we are very grateful for that. Now, Adam is here to tell us more on the current events, as well as take questions live in the chat. But first, I have some questions for him. Firstly, how's it going?
Mate, it's not too bad, not too bad. I mean, look, Justin, that short comment was uncalled for, man. You know, I'm exactly 6 foot now. I was 5'11" and a half for a long time, and I'm 6 foot now. Come on.
All right. Well, I guess it is unfair, but, you know, we're all short kings here, right? We're all short kings.
Hell yeah.
6 foot short kings, let's go.
Standard for women now is like 6'5", I think, so you gotta be careful.
Amazoness woman.
But yeah. So Adam, go ahead and tell us what you can about where you're at right now. Where do you reside? What's the news?
Yeah, so I figured I'd start with, the sort of most pressing bit, which is the vaccine mandates, just sort of where we are on that point. So I know you guys in the US, seems that Biden's pushing through for businesses over 100 and your Supreme Court's fighting it and whatnot. But we've been under vaccine mandates for at least like 6 to 8 months now. If you haven't been jabbed, you cannot work. So that doesn't matter whether that's in Macca's, whether that's in office, you can't work. If you work from home or digitally, you still can. But if you're in person in any capacity, they straight up do not let you work. So, I had a part-time job at Macca's while I was studying and whatnot, and I wasn't even fired. You just, you're let go indefinitely because you don't have the job. Simple as that.
Dang, man. Oh, shit.
And then, it doesn't only extend to jobs and work and that kind of stuff, but it also extends to what sort of shops you can access. So for us, I can't access, as of last week, they've recently changed it, but for a long time, I can't access anything that's not essential retail. So if you want to get a haircut, can't do that. If you want to go to the movies, can't do that without the vax. If you want to go anywhere, and this isn't even businesses themselves enforcing it, this is the government forcing them to then do it.
Right.
So stuff like shopping centres, you can't go inside if you're like going to, can't go in. The only places the unvaxxed could go is places like essential retail, so shopping centres that do food. So for us, it would be Woolworths. What do you guys have over there? At Walmart, I guess you guys could go into Walmart because they sell food, but
we got Walmart.
For us, you're pretty much locked out of everything that's not, essential for life.
So like if I was trying to go into like I don't know, let's say a KFC, what if I just say that's like essential for me? What if I'm like an African American fellow and I need to get into a KFC?
So KFC itself, they'd let you buy things from KFC and they'd let you go through the drive-through, but you can't sit inside and eat. So you can still go through, and same with like places like Kmart, you can click and collect and just get it from the front of the store. You can't go inside. You can get things delivered to your house, particularly with like coffee places and restaurants and that sort of thing. You can eat outside, you can order takeaway, but you're not allowed inside the restaurant. And they've just changed that in the last week, right? It's very
Right.
weird, suddenly they've decided apparently we have a few less cases, but Omicron's lurking, so they've changed regulations and now we're allowed in essential retail, just in time for the Christmas shop. So it seems that they more so just want our money and anything else than actually letting us in. They're just letting us go around Christmas shop for a bit. We're allowed in non-essential retail places like Target and Myers and whatnot.
Right, of course.
See, I'm trying to find the perfect slot for what you Americans would buy, because I don't know if you guys have the same shopping places and the same brands and whatnot. So I'm trying to find little coincides, but all I can think of is Home Depot and Walmart.
Oh jeez. I guess considering that Negated is based in Texas, I guess we got HEB, which is it's a grocery store. Yeah, like grocery stuff.
Yeah.
There's also I guess Walmart, yeah. We do have a lot of the same fast foods, I'm pretty sure, so.
Yeah. But one of the interesting things I found when they changed the restrictions is that the only they let us go shop, spend money and whatnot, but they kept the mask mandate in place, but they refused to let us in for hairdressers, right? You can't go to hairdressers, you can't get your hair cut. It's been like this for 9 months if you're not vaxxed. And my little personal theory is that they want the people who are refusing to take the jab to look crazy, right? They want their hair to be long, they want them to look unkempt, they don't want them to be shaved and clean. Honestly, because then you just go, oh, that's a crazy, insane person. Of course I won't listen to them.
Right. Well, that's actually a very interesting theory, and it does seem like it would make sense, to kind of push people like us, the non-vaccinated individuals, to look like we are crazy, even though we aren't. Yeah.
And, dude, they keep changing the definition of anti-vaxxer and vaccinated. So I believe now, if you've had 2 jabs, right, and you don't want to have a booster, right, you're like, no, I'm fine, I don't need a booster. You're an anti-vaxxer and you're unvaxxed. So even if you've had 2 vaccinations, they consider you, if you don't take the next booster, you're an anti-vaxxer. And I'm almost certain
that's actually foul. Holy crap.
Yeah, 4 jabs. It's you need 2 boosters now, and you've had 2 jabs and a booster, but you haven't had your second booster. You're an anti-vaxxer, you're unvaccinated, you're this, you're that. And I believe it was the Western Australian, I guess governor would be the equivalent for you guys, that said, even if you're fully vaccinated and you say that vaccine mandates are wrong or bad, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a this, you're a that, you're a... So it's really, really insane. And of course, there's been large protest movements developing to sort of counter all this.
Right.
It's been happening for a long time now, ever since they brought in the mask mandates and the lockdowns. I can more so talk about what's sort of happening in Victoria, because there's not a lot of federal power in Australia. A lot of the states sort of just do their own thing. But I can sort of talk from where my state is, which is essentially Victoria's sort of the California of Australia.
Right.
Things are a little bit more extreme here than the rest of them, but they all tend to end up following us eventually.
Interesting. Well, I guess for people who don't really understand the divisions of Australia, how would you explain it kind of simply, the different, because there's 8 different regions or 8 different states?
So there's, just quickly counting them in my head right now, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 6 or 7 states, right? They're much larger than American states generally. Victoria's sort of down near the bottom right. It's that sort of California bit, large entertainment industry, by the coast, all that. And then we sort of have one of the larger states. Queensland is similar to Texas. There's a lot higher firearm, owning over there. But again, you got to remember, Australians gave up their firearms a long time ago. So none of us are armed. So particularly when it comes to resisting government tyranny or anything like that, the government is not afraid of its citizens, because its citizens are not only unarmed, but frankly, a lot of them don't care.
Yeah, that's terrible. It really is. I mean, like I said in my other Australia video, that Australia is a testing ground for a lot of things that can happen in Australia, and I would even stem to say that whatever happens in Australia most likely will definitely happen in America. So we.
Oh, you got to remember, Australians have never fought for their liberty, right? We never violently separated from the British. It was handed to us. And any war or thing we've participated in, we've won. We've done fairly well for ourselves. But the front has been fairly far away from us, right? Our involvement in World War II, we sent boys over to Gallipoli, but the citizens themselves never really had to fight. Now, the Japanese got close at one point, but for the large part, Australians don't really care or never have had to fight for their liberty, just in general.
Right.
And again, we don't have a lot of the same protections you guys have through your constitution. We're not set up like that. So we have a constitution, but it has very little protections or rights and all that. When the founders of our country were making the constitution, they said there are still many, many things to be written into this constitution. This is merely just a general sort of framework.
Right. I mean, do you know what your constitution was based off of when y'all wrote it? Was it like
English common law?
Okay.
That's the framework which ours is set up under. So we don't have like a president or anything. We only have the state government, and then you have the federal government.
Right. Well,
But,
I guess that being said, it's like what's the? I guess. What do you think is the kind of the dropping off point? Do you think that it's going to be the vaccine mandates that really causes kind of a more I don't want to call it radical, but a revolutionary type attitude? Do you think that the Australian people are going to be paying more attention to this? Do you think they are paying attention right now? Because I'm not in Australia and I don't get to experience this firsthand. But what are you seeing basically?
we've slowly seen increases in unrest as more and more people are, sort of subjugated to this. I remember early when we live in in the most lockdown city in the world, right? Melbourne has had the longest lockdowns out of anywhere in the world, longer than Italy, longer than all of that, dude. Our guys are completely insane. So there was some protests fairly early on, and I was attending them, but there was only 100 people at the first one, and then maybe we got to 200, but out of our entire population, that's way too small. And at one point, there was far more police officers than there were protesters. There was 100 protesters, and there were 400 police officers dispersed all around us. But that has slowly increased, as people are not only is it a mask mandate, but it's now a vaccine mandate. And as more and more people are getting damaged or hurt by either legislation or the vaccines themselves, people, even those who are fully vaxxed, are pretty ticked that this is still going on. And so that's slowly grown. At one point, they made protests illegal because, of course, the protest was happening during a lockdown. And so because we were locked down for essentially years, we were protesting in spite of that, and the police used tear gas, rubber bullets. They abused old women. There was just an old woman, sitting there protesting along, and they threw her onto the ground, all that sort of stuff. And there's photos and videos of all this I can provide after, if we need to authenticate that. And I think that's when I first met you guys at Negated, right, as the illegal protests were happening. And these aren't violent protests, right? These aren't protests where, we're not damaging property, we're not doing anything. Everyone's packing up their rubbish after them. Everyone's quite happy and nice and respectful. But regardless, the police seem to be the ones agitating there. And it sort of grew to about 15,000 people. That's where we hit one. And this was amazing. It was good. And then they're coinciding, these protests, with other protests globally all throughout Europe. We're not sure if any have come through America, but they're called the Freedom Day rallies. And at the most recent Freedom Day rally, estimates have the people that were there from 400,000 to 500,000, 4 to 500,000. Some people were claiming, it's 1 million and this and that. I don't think it was 1 million, but from what I saw there, now that they're legal again, the police aren't beating people, they're not firing rubber bullets. We had 4 to 500,000 people there, all protesting against vaccine mandates, as well as this new bill they were passing to give them a bunch more powers.
Yeah, go ahead and I guess since we've kind of pivoted to the bill now, go ahead and tell us a little bit about the bill. What does that entail?
Dude. Scary stuff. So there's dual things for this bill. One point is the current implications, so the very scary stuff that's going to happen right now. And the second half is the very scary stuff that's going to happen in future. So I sort of got a bunch of notes here on my phone just to the side. I'm not going to read out the bill in its entirety because it's very long, but I've sort of taken excerpts and sections that directly apply. And this was fought in Parliament, surprisingly, even by our more less radical side. They even fought against the bill, which was great, and they did a few reforms, so I might have to correct myself version of the bill. But Section B allows our Premier, so the Governor, to declare a pandemic, enlivening the new part where satisfied there is a serious risk to public health arising from a pandemic or disease of pandemic potential. So what that means is he can declare a pandemic when he chooses. So it's not a independent medical body that comes. He doesn't need to provide evidence. He can declare a pandemic. And can be renewed for up to 3 months at a time, but there's no outer limit on the renewal. So he can declare, yep, there's a pandemic, give me all these additional powers. And then 3 months later, all he has to do is go, yep, pandemic's still here. There's no oversight committee. He doesn't have to have support of the Parliament or the government, which represents our people. He just has to decide.
Wow. That sounds a little tyrannical, if I do say so myself.
Well, people have drawn comparisons to the, I'm trying to remember the exact name of the bill, but Hitler passed a bill much earlier which gave him the power in order to establish, or just essentially allowed him to decide when not pandemics, but more control over public health. I think you remember the original reason for the concentration camps with the Jews and with all this sort of stuff was in fact for public health and public cleanliness. And we're seeing a very similar for these lockdowns, for these quarantine camps and whatnot.
Yeah, because wasn't it to control the typhus outbreak?
Yeah, I believe so. And then we have an unelected official, right? The chief health officer, which is decided by the government. So we don't vote for him directly. The people of the state, vote for their politician. In our case, it was Dan Andrews who's doing all this. And then he then chooses his own staff and health minister and whatnot. And so Section D gives the Minister for Health broad power to make pandemic orders where reasonably necessary to protect public health. Now, you might notice that there's a fair few broad terms there, right? First of all, just straight up say, it says broad power to make pandemic orders. Well, what's a pandemic order? Anything for public health. So he has power to make any declaration for public health where he believes it's necessary. So it doesn't have to be legal. It doesn't have to... sorry, I should correct myself there. It does have to be legal with our other laws and not violate that.
Right.
But ability to make orders on his own, so without approval from Parliament, without approval from our elected officials, just him, a completely unelected bureaucrat, now has power to declare lockdowns, to force someone to go to a quarantine camp, to do all this sort of stuff, even without a positive test, without any sort of evidence, as long as they themselves deem it to be reasonably necessary.
Yeah, that sounds kind of terrible, because I know in America we have, or at least we attempt to have, checks and balances where we try to prevent this kind of stuff. We don't let there be just a guy at the top, like a top dog, That's not to say that I don't support something akin to a monarchy, which is something we do talk about in other streams, but that's not what this stream is for.
No, fair. Section E is a really worrying bit, which is the next sort of bit. And this more so falls into future problems, but it also sort of applies now. And that's, they've specified a non-exhaustive list. So first of all, non-exhaustive list means they can just add anything retroactively to that list. Right? It's a non-exhaustive, so they can just come up with anything on the spot and go, the legislation says non-exhaustive. Yeah, we can do it now. Non-exhaustive list of pandemic management powers that can be exercised by the chief health officer and authorized officers. So that little section down there, authorized officers, is kind of worrying. So not only can the chief health officer force you to do this, force you to do that, has a non-exhaustive list of powers which they can add anything to retroactively, Now we have these little special authorized officers. These aren't police officers. These aren't elected officials. They're authorized officers. And what an authorized officer is, I think they speak about it later in the legislation, but an authorized officer is someone that is chosen by the chief health officer and the premier. So they don't have to have training, they don't have to have this, but all of a sudden, the leaders of the nation now have these people who can order people around, who can do special powers that are elected and chosen by them, completely separate from the police force, completely separate from the government, completely separate from anything like that.
Weapons over here.
So they just kind of work on their own. They don't consult anyone.
Yeah, so no consultation, but also no necessary training. They don't have to go through any background checks. They don't have to go through anything like this. So if you, as a governor, can all of a sudden give people these special powers to control the citizens, and you no longer have to rely on the police force or the federal government or anything like that.
Right.
It's essentially them sort of authorizing their, I mean, I don't want to say militia because it's not built out of the people or anything like that, but essentially they can authorize their own small police force, which is technically, you know, specially designed to help with health orders and that kind of stuff. But whether they actually do what they say they're doing or whether that's just a smokescreen for them to actually apply, they're less than good intentions.
So I guess like, is there any bars from having a governor say just raise his? Can he have like his own private kind of security and then take office as a governor and then utilize that as his form of I guess enforcement?
Yeah. So if he had, if the police were being uncooperative, right? They're like, no, we're not going to enforce this vaccine mandate. We're not going to listen to you. And he had his own, you know, security force before entering office. He could just make them all authorized officers, and they can go around enforcing that for the state. And then I think in section F, which is the next little section, it goes clarify, because we have a lot of anti-discrimination laws in Australia, right? Ones which I don't even necessarily agree with, right? They go, hey, you can't refuse to hire someone for their beliefs or for this or for that. So if you're a Christian school teaching Christian values and someone who doesn't agree with your Christian values applies for getting hired, well, you can't really say no because that would be discrimination. But at least theoretically, the unvaccinated should be protected from discrimination because that's a medical status and you're not allowed to discriminate on medical status with this other legislation they put through. But Section F now clarifies that pandemic orders can differentiate between people in a range of settings according to public health risk. For example, vaccination status. So that gives them a lot of powers. The first, because it doesn't sort of play into their agenda, but theoretically those are the powers which they've just given themselves.
So there's no criteria that's required to just declare these kind of declare people public health risk. It can just be anything arbitrary.
It's up to them to figure out what's a public health risk. So one of the quote-unquote wins they got when they were debating this legislation and they managed to delay it for a bit is that there's a special oversight committee now for all of these decisions. And the oversight committee was in there before, but the oversight committee was appointed by the government. So they just put all their mates on there and then, you know, move on and do whatever they want. But now the oversight committee can't have a majority by the government. People are like, oh, this is a massive win, this is good. But the oversight committee's advice, so if they go, hey, what you're doing is retarded and against the law and bad, their advice isn't legally binding. So they can say whatever they want. The oversight committee can say, dude, you're literally doing horrible things to people. We want you to stop this right now. And the leader can just go, all right, it sucks. This is non-binding. This isn't legally binding. I can literally just keep doing what I'm doing. So that's how they say, oh, we have accountability. Look, there's an oversight committee. But the oversight committee doesn't actually have any power.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like you know, they're just kind of like the UN. They just kind of say things and then people listen.
Exactly.
Maybe they don't listen.
And then Section G, which allow the government to, without evidence, seize an account, so a social media account, and impersonate the person for an indefinite amount of time. So right now, you know, I got my little Twitter account and whatnot. If they go, hey, we think this guy's up to some dodgy stuff, they can seize my account and then they can pretend to be me and try and lure other people in.
Interesting.
So some people are like, oh, this guy on the internet, he's a federal agent, he's a what, he's this, he's that. They now can just take the accounts of large people who, you know, don't agree with the government, who are acting in a dissident manner, and just take over the account and impersonate them for as long as they want. But the reason I say that is because this next development is even worse. And it's remove barriers to gathering and sharing information during a pandemic, and include enhanced information safeguards for contracting information, including QR code data and interview information. So if you go for an interview for a job and you're unvaxxed and you tell them you're unvaxxed and they hire you anyway, government has access to that. Anytime you scan a QR code to log in and that, government has access.
Interesting.
And then Section H is where we start hearing about those authorised officers again. Provide for authorised officers to continue to exercise key functions and powers to support the pandemic response. So this is giving them the power to do things normally you might have done by police or anything else. You know, normally would be, hey, you're breaking the law, we're going to stop you from breaking the law. Well, as long as it relates to a pandemic order, which, you know, can be anything by the chief health officer, these guys can now enforce it. They themselves can now appoint broader classes of authorised officers to support capacity. So what does that mean? Well, that means if the chief health officer makes a authorised officer, that authorised officer can now authorise other officers. He can make more of himself. So if there's a protest or something going on, or they're like, hey, the people are revolting, we need way more authorised officers, those authorised officers themselves can now appoint other authorised officers who have the same powers as them.
Interesting. So what does that what does that mean for like the future? What's a scenario that could come up out of this?
I'm a reload.
See, it's almost impossible to make a scenario that's worse than what we are in now, right? It's like, oh, you know, they'd lock you in your home for a few years. Well, they've already done that. Or you lose your job. Well, they've already done that. Oh, they make you not able to enter stores and buy things. Well, they've done that. Right now, we still have these pandemic or quarantine facilities.
Right.
Which, if you, if you test positive and are coming into the country or something like that, then they lock you in these quarantine facilities for 2 weeks. Now, some people haven't been let out even after 2 weeks, and they forcibly keep you there. So, you know, maybe they end up herding all the unvaxxed into those, right? That's the only thing that could make it even worse.
Interesting. So, there's other countries that kind of do this, but like, let's say I was to go visit Australia, would they put me in those same camps, or would I be in a different camp, or?
So they'd put you in those camps for 2 weeks until you've quarantined. Yeah, so they're quarantine camps. So you don't even have to test positive.
Okay.
They just put you in the camp for 2 weeks as you're entering the country, and then I think leaving the country, there's quarantine restrictions and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. So you need to quarantine in Australia before you leave?
So you need to quarantine if you come in Australia and you're vaxxed. So if you leave Australia and you're unvaxxed, that's fine. But if you try and come back in, even if you're a citizen, if you're unvaxxed, they will not let you back into Australia.
Wow.
So if I, as a citizen, go for a holiday to Bali or to Indonesia or any of these countries near me, and I'm unvaxxed, even though I'm a citizen of this country, they will not let me back in.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, so in Taiwan, where my family's from, I guess I'm further doxing myself.
Wait, you didn't tell me you were Asian? What the fuck?
Whoa,
Damn, dude, what?
Yeah.
We can't be friends anymore.
This is unprecedented, unpresidential of me.
Disgusting. Can't believe it.
Absolutely disgusting. I can't believe it either that I'm Asian. But they have passports to Taiwan, and even though they have passports, they still have to go through security measures as if they didn't have passports to get into Taiwan. So
Okay.
So they would have to sit in camps. They're not just immediately cleared at the airport like they usually would.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it would be kind of similar, but maybe it is more severe. I don't know. I haven't done any international traveling. I've done in-country traveling in the United States of America. God bless.
Beautiful country.
Yeah. But there's nothing right now that I've personally experienced that could relate to how you're kind of describing it. But I don't know. And I guess to go back to my question of like if it could get worse or what the future could project. Maybe we can't, visualize how it would look like in the future, but is there? Do you think it could get worse? Do you think it will get better? What do you think the outcome?
I do. Yeah, I'm reminded of this anecdote of Stalin's got this chicken, and he painfully rips every feather out of the chicken. And the chicken's sitting there bleeding, brutalized, and he just gives it a little bit of grain afterwards. And all of a sudden the chicken loves him and trusts him again. And he uses this as an analogy for how the people interact with the state. And so essentially that's what I sort of see happening within my country. I see all these horrifying regulations being put forward, things getting worse, but then things get 10% better. So things might get 30% more restrictive, 10% better. 30% more restrictive, 10% better, right? We're locked out of our jobs. We are unable to shop anywhere. We have mask mandates everywhere. And then they're like, oh, we're now going to let you go into non-essential. And then it will get twice as worse. And then a little bit better, twice as worse. I think the next section of the legislation, I think that's the last bit I've got for notes as well, is particularly interesting. And this is the real scary bit. Deter and support a proportionate response to the most egregious related behaviours to the pandemic by providing for an aggravated offence, deter body corporate entities from non-compliance, and it sort of goes on. What they're essentially saying is that if a business refuses to look for vaccinations before they hire a person or before they let a person in,
right,
it's a $40,000 fine.
So not only are you not allowed to get work or go out without a vaccination, or just in general in some states, employers who just want to hire people for their business can't do that because
it's
the government said so.
$40,000 fine, and that is reduced. It was $100,000 in the first thing of the legislation, but they managed to whittle it down to $40,000. That's not the worst part. There's some very scary language in this bit of the bill. Egregious pandemic-related behaviours. So if you have COVID, right, and you leave your house when you're in quarantine, that's counted as an egregious pandemic-related offence, and that is I think, a $40,000 fine as well. So if you leave your house with COVID when you're supposed to be locked down, $40,000 fine. If you intentionally spread COVID, $40,000 fine. If you do anything that's technically put as an egregious related, $40,000 fine. A second class, which scares me even more, with pandemic ignorance. So if I refuse to wear a mask, because masks are mandated in every shop and almost every setting,
right,
it's a $10,000 fine if you don't wear a mask when you're supposed to. So it's not an egregious pandemic-related offence, but it's still a pandemic-related offence, and it's a $10,000 fine for each violation of that. Even not QR coding. So we have to scan a QR code, and every time we enter a shop, a church, anything, and then that information is shared with the government, so they know exactly when and where we are at all times. And if you fail to do that even once, $10,000 fine.
Interesting.
And of course, if you can't pay these fines, or if you refuse to pay these fines, they can be translated into jail time, into other things similar to other punishments.
Right, of course, yeah. I mean, they called us conspiracy theorists, and just we're just expecting the worst when we're like, oh, they're literally gonna put people who are not vaccinated, political dissidents, in prison, and that seems like that's exactly what they're doing in Australia.
I think Monica Smith is one of the political dissidents in Australia, organised some of the protests and whatnot, and they put her in jail for months because she was inciting a riot. So incitement to riot or inciting to violate the pandemic orders. They can put you in jail for telling other people to ignore the pandemic orders, to not get vaxxed, all that sort of stuff. And they had her in for prison for a fair few months. And then she got bail, right? She managed to get bail and got out of prison while she's waiting for her court date. But her bail conditions were that she doesn't talk about the government. So a person in a supposedly free society, in all this sort of stuff, their very bail conditions are that they cannot talk about the government. It's disgusting.
It's terrible.
That's all I've sort of got as far as notes go and the exact legislation to sort of give you guys a picture of what's happening in Australia. But I'm more than happy to riff for a bit here with random questions wherever the conversation takes us.
Yeah. I guess, T, you got any questions for Adam here?
Let's see. I guess I should probably ask, at least in regards to, all the restrictions and whatnot, is like the idea is that, just quality of life has just gone down, like, astronomically, at least, compared to pre-COVID. You think that, like, this is just, like, an opportunity for, like, the government of Australia to just, like, say, hey, you know what? Let's do a social experiment. Let's treat our citizens like crap, Like, you think this is just an opportunity for them to show their true colors, or, what?
Look, the people who are in power at the moment in our state are the Labor Party. So Labor Party, of course, like, you Americans have everything different, right? The Liberals for you guys are the scary leftists, and the Conservatives or the Republicans are the other way around. Even your colours are mixed up compared to ours. But for us, the Liberal Party, I'd say, would be similar to the Republican Party, except we have a federal Liberal government at the moment, and they've done nothing against the vaccine mandates, nothing against the mask mandates, nothing against all that. They talk a lot about freedom the second they're going for an election. But the second they're in, things continually just go downhill. And the Labor Party, of course, are just open collectivists. They don't like they don't like big business and free enterprise and all that, but they're very cozy with big business and labour unions and whatnot. They continually push more and more legislation which damages the country, does all that sort of stuff. So I think, sort of to answer your question, this is just what they've wanted to do for a very long time. But they've just seen an opportunity. Now they have all these special powers. Now they have just a slight majority in government in our state to essentially give himself tons of powers, which permanently he wouldn't have, which otherwise without the pandemic he wouldn't have been able to give to himself.
All right, yeah.
It seems like kind of like a abuse of power because of just like a crisis. Crisis always results in some sort of abuse of power. Wasn't like taxes supposed to be like in America at least, I think there's like something about like income tax is supposed to be like a temporary thing or very limited, and now it's like
it initially was supposed was supposed to be a temporary measure to fund the war, and then it kind of stayed around. I think a good Thomas Swalwell quote is, "Nothing's so permanent as a temporary government program."
Oh, the government really do be doing things, but they do be doing more things in Australia. It seems to be pretty bad, but I guess to kind of pivot away from black pills, is there anything that's looking better in Australia? Maybe how the people are responding, or are people getting more red pilled, or is the government kind of letting up, or what's going on?
So there's first of all, the protests have gone from very small numbers to hundreds of thousands of people. So that's a massive white pill. I'm like, okay, we're not completely alone in this. There's tons of us. Now, even in America, right, a protest with hundreds of thousands of people would be crazy. But I'm going to get my calculator up for a second. We only have a population of 20 million, right? So divide 20 million by, 400,000? No. I'm marking up my math somewhere here. But we have a small population. So for us to get 400,000 or 500,000, that's like half a percentage of the entire population out protesting. Like 0.5% of the entire population of your country is out there protesting at one time. Never mind all the people who can't make it or weren't aware or could still be turned. That's a massive white pill, as well as, we got people protesting, even people like business owners that would normally be kind of leftist. One of the local coffee shops near where I live, we're good mates with the owner, and he's sort of a American liberal, he's leftist, he's all peace and love and all that. And the government is sending around officers to check people's papers and check their passports and make sure they're not unvaxxed in the shop. And he's like, mate, this feels like fascism. This is terrifying, So even the sort of leftist kumbaya types, which normally would support this sort of stuff, a fair few of them are waking up and agreeing with us. And the best thing about all of this is that there are people who agree with the government who can be swayed to our side, but there is no one who is to us that can ever be turned back. Every time we turn someone back to our side, every time they realise, become, red-pilled or whatever, there's no way they're going back to trusting the government, but we can still convince a lot of people who trust the government that they're currently being oppressed. So that's a few white pills, a bit of hope for the future. Oh, of course. How can I forget about this? So in Australia, we have political parties just like you guys, but we have preference voting, right? Look, I love America. I love it, but preference voting is one of the few sides where I side with Australia well over America. We're able to vote for one party, and if that party doesn't win, well, then we can vote for who we'd like our vote to then go to next. So I can write, let's say we have the Libertarians in America, right? You got the Libertarian Party,
Sort of,
the Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
I can vote for Libertarian Party first, and then as my second choice, choose Republicans, and then third choice, choose the Democrats. And if the Libertarians don't win, well, then all their votes will then go to the Republicans. And then if the Republicans don't win, well, then my vote would go to the Democrats. So what it is it allows you to vote for a minor party who you agree with more than one of the major parties without wasting your vote. And what that allows us to do is actually have a chance at winning government here. So there's a few parties that have sort of popped up. There's, and there's varying degrees of radicalism. The most, and look, mate, I say radicalism, but I also kind of agree with them, right? I'm a little bit of a radical myself.
Aren't we
So
all?
the most radical I would say, yeah, exactly. The most radical one I would say is the Australia One Party, who is sort of the government is all controlled by pedophiles and all that sort of stuff. And not saying whether they're right or wrong, but they're sort of the most extreme side of it. And then you have ones that are more, less extreme, but still anti-vaccine lockdown, anti-mandate, anti-all that sort of stuff. And among them is the United Australia Party. And that party at the moment is the largest political party in Australia. They've had, I think, 80 to 100,000 members sign up and join the party in the last year. And, just sign up and become a party member. All the parties try and do it, but hardly anyone ever does it. Well, they're now the largest political party in Australia just by party membership. So not by votes, but by party membership. And they're only just jumping into this election. So we have a real hope that a lot of these United Australia Party candidates can win, even if some people they might put the Libertarian, like for us, our Libertarian Party is sort of called the Liberal Democrats. That's our Libertarian Party. And so they might put them as their first vote and they don't get in, but then all their votes go to United Australia Party. And if we make sure to not put any of the major parties on our ballot, so we can, I think, vote for like 8 parties or 16 parties or 32 parties. We put them down at like 31 and 32. Well, the votes are going to coalesce between so many other parties that if enough of us do it, we can actually lock them out from government entirely. So there's a fair few white pills. I think the election's next year. So there's an election next year, and hopefully, we can get a few white pills through and win.
Interesting. So how often do you guys have elections, actually?
I think every 4 years, similar to you
4
guys.
years? Okay.
I think on at least, so we got, state and then federal elections. I think the federal elections are next year, and the state might be the year after that. But it tends to be every 4 years. Although, mate, because we are in a parliamentary system,
Right.
we can call elections early. We can do all this sort of stuff. So similar how Canada recently called its elections early, with the majority in government. Whoever has the majority in government can be like, oh, I reckon public opinion's really swayed my way at the moment. I might call an election early before they figure out I've done this dodgy thing or before public opinion changes or anything like that. Plus, because our government can be built off a coalition, So one party might not win enough seats to completely control the government, so they might team up with another party in order to form that. If those parties start disagreeing and don't want to work together anymore, things can change. I think we went through, our Prime Minister's sort of the equivalent of your president, and
Right.
we went through like 5 or 4 Prime Ministers in like 4 years, just because each one kept like backstabbing the other. Like one came in, got backstabbed by their party, and then someone else led a coup within the party to then kick them out, and then vice versa. And so, there's a lot of volatility still. So the election can always be called earlier, but at the very latest, it'll be later this year. I mean, next year, because nearly 2022 already.
Oh, interesting. That does seem like quite a kerfuffle that we seem to be in. Yeah, elections coming up for us too. We got elections. Elections are big deal.
Is that federal election soon? Is it the presidential election or is it
2024 is the presidential election.
2024? It's so long away.
Yeah, but I mean these years go by fast. So I don't know.
Yeah, they do. And you guys are suffering a fair bit of inflation at the moment.
Yeah, but it's a good thing. That means we have more money in our pockets. At least more dollar
Oh, of
bills in our
course.
pockets.
You hear what Jen Psaki said the other day about inflation? Just don't spend money. Just don't buy things and you won't feel inflation.
Yeah, it's you'll only feel the effects of it if you participate in the system. Obviously, George Floyd was absolutely right. It's this fiat currency it's really causing this degeneration. Saint Floyd,
man.
if you will.
Saint Floyd. Gonna do the sign of the cross real quick.
Catholic moment.
Catholics be like.
Yeah, we partake in a little tomfoolery against our fellow Christians.
Yeah, look, hey, I just want to get society back to the point where we can start openly hating and fighting the Catholics and the Jews and the other religions and all that. I'm sick of all this atheism and agnosticism. Let's just get highly religious so we can start fighting everyone again. I miss it,
Yeah, no.
A little bit of trolling.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of infighting as well. It's always healthy. It helps establish your what you actually believe in, But yeah.
No, well, it's really fascinating to see now because everyone likes to think, oh, if I was in Germany or if I was in the Soviet Union, I wouldn't rat out my neighbours. I'd be part of the resistance. I'd do this. I'd do that. And right now, where the government is asking people to rat out their neighbours who aren't vaxxed and rat out people who are breaking the legislation and aren't masking and all that, you're seeing, oh, you would turn me into the government. You like to think you're doing this, but no, you would be the person to be like, all right, well, I'm gonna tell the government because I sort of have to, man. So you're really seeing, who would be strong and who would stand still and fight against the government and who would like to think they would, but when push comes to shove, they don't.
Right.
No, I got no more notes, no more topics to talk about, so I'm happy to just riff on whatever.
Yeah, I guess now that kind of like the serious topics are pretty much done with. We got any goofy funnies we want to talk about? Any
Little trolling?
Yeah, a little trolling. And have you been doing any recent trolling? Anything funny to mess with federal feds, if you will?
I mean, look, I may have...
Anything you're allowed to talk about. You gotta.
I was going to say, I'm going to try not to admit to a crime live on the air, but
Right.
Not messing with the feds, but a while back I joined a communist organization at our university, and then I managed to get elected to the board of that organization. And so, I may or may not have infiltrated it for a fair bit. I wonder how these guys run things. They're trying to organise counter-protests against these evil fascist protesters who are hating the mandates, right? They're all evil, racist fascists. Mind you, the racial diversity at these protests has been amazing. Because, of course, Australia is a nation largely of immigrants, right? We had a pretty small population and we just ramped up immigration massively particularly from Southeast Asian countries. Like, we're sort of this one dot of West in the middle of, right next to China and all these other places. So we've had a lot of immigration to our country. But there's like such racial diversity at these protests that people are calling them white nationalist rallies and whatnot. And the like black guys and African guys standing there, sort of like, wait, what? we're racist? We're nationalists? All right, we're white nationalists now. Cool.
They're whites now. The white
exactly.
brothers. Yeah.
Hey, you
Black
guys
is the
are,
new
well,
white.
didn't you hear that? Didn't you hear that Asians are now white?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Asians are
Boys,
white.
you're with us. You're one of us now. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go.
Now we can.
We stay
take part
winning,
in
never
white
punished.
privilege.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You get to cash in on all of that juicy white privilege.
Yeah,
But if
never punished.
Asian,
I'm telling you.
I know. If Asians are white now, are whites also Asian? Like, do I get to bump my IQ up a few points? Do I?
Yeah, you're honorary Asian. You can increase
Honorary
your
Asians?
IQ artificially now. We allow it. It's true.
Mate, I got some Jewish and black friends, and each of them has made me an honorary black man and an honorary Jew, respectively. So I'm just going around collecting all the ethnicities, like little
Hey,
infinity.
yo, Adam,
stones.
who's in Paris?
Yeah, Adam, who was in Paris?
Who was in Paris?
I'm being tongued.
I think
I'm being tongued.
I'm running.
Are you underneath the bleachers?
But no,
Michelle.
I think niggas were in Paris, if I do recall.
Yeah.
So
Hey, yeah.
we're deep enough in the stream where YouTube will not be like. Now we can
Exactly.
actually talk about like real controversial things. So yeah,
A little bit more radical.
YouTube checks like the first 10-15 minutes of live streams, and then sometimes they leave, and they'll tune in later on. But we're
Well, there's
pretty
advantage of the stream being relatively small as well. That they're not necessarily going to knock on us or find us that easily.
No, that's.
You think Margaret Thatcher effectively used girl power when she funded paramilitary death squads such as the IRA?
See, this is
Northern
where
Ireland?
it gets a deep conflict because I'm half Irish, right? And so I'm
Right.
like, Margaret Thatcher, cool, based, but also I'm supposed to be Irish and hate her. So, the two sides of me are fighting deep within one another. Irish and Lebanese, beautiful mix right there.
Yes, Irish, Lebanese people.
Right, I throw an explosive backpack under a car, innovating on the car bomb.
I am a car bomb.
I am a car
Alright.
bomb.
Let's see, we ready to start this concert?
Yeah, boys.
Well,
let's
I guess
go.
we are.
Whoever did that, your mama ho.
I did that.
I'm going
You'd love to
upstairs.
see it. I'm joining you.
Alright, get the other door, the one behind me.
But nah, you guys been up to much?
Recently,
Negated
no.
podcast got anything coming down the pipeline?
Way down the pipeline, much later. That's a charger. Oh, I'm dead.
Oh.
No, we have some big things planned, I guess, in terms of Negated. We got our Christmas video.
Yeah, that'll
I'm
be
gonna
exciting.
run to the
Looking forward to
stage.
it.
Get out of my way. But we got our Christmas video. Still waiting on some things to come in, healing. But let's see. Anything interesting? I guess
Jockey.
oh. Got you. That's a dude. Okay. I guess this right here, right now. This is the Australia video. 'Cause,
The Australia video part 2. 1 hour long, beautiful.
Oh, here comes the
Amazing edits.
the edits are great. The graphics are actually they
Oh.
look pretty good on YouTube. Streaming from my
Audio quality.
potato.
Audio quality is interesting, We really want to make you feel that 1950s vibe.
I like the 1950s.
Beautiful decade.
I'm more of a 1960s guy, but 1950s is pretty good.
Fair.
Oh snap! Throw him. Give me one of those. There we go.
I'm tempted to immigrate to Mexico just so I can sneak across the border and join you guys, do a little IRL.
Yeah, you can come to the studio. We actually do have something set up for Negated. The camera work. I got a new camera, and I set up some more
Nice.
lights and stuff. and we can have guests live because we're not in a dystopian state where you can't have smaller or where my gatherings don't have to be less than 10 people. We can have as
2 to 4 people. 2 to 4.
Let's go.
Me when I completely disobey. Oh no, Rochelle. But yeah, we disobey the law a little bit. Let's see. T, have you been doing any tomfoolery as of late? Nothing that.
No, I've been a good child of God, as I should.
Jeez.
No, but I've been
Always
smoking a bunch of heroin recently.
Smoking heroin.
Smoking heroin. Let's go.
That's
This dude gonna drink weed next.
smoking like people who truly have never done any sort of illicit substance.
Yeah, I have done a weed before. Yeah, don't you do a weed sometimes?
Not personally. Not personally. I tend to be
Nope.
I'm reloading.
charger. Mate, I'm one of the most Puritan individuals when it comes to that stuff.
Pick him up.
No
I'll throw a
drugs,
Molotov
no
on
alcohol.
him.
Good.
Hold up, I got my ball bomb. I'll wait for the helicopter to come to site.
Oh, what the heck? What hit me?
That would be a rock, mate, from a hulky big
Rochelle.
tank.
Oh, alright, well.
Where the tank
Where's
at?
the helicopter?
Oh, we got different
there.
priorities.
There's a hunter. Goodbye, health.
Hunter. Got him.
But no. Content creation on my side has slowed significantly after I had to leave uni because, I'm a filthy unvaxxed, so I've been removed from
Oh, you've been
university.
removed.
I mean, so I've been removed, so you can't be on campus at all if you're unvaxxed, nor can you be in accommodation where I was. Now, they still will let you, pay them $10,000 or however much it is per year to do online schooling. But dude, I've been doing online schooling for like 3 or 4 years now. I cannot take a fifth. I'm going to go crazy.
Tank. Yeah, that's interesting. You pay the same prices for like half the education.
It's insane.
It's like that.
Inflation go more.
It's like that JonTron bit where it's like you've done half a job, you got a full smile. Oh, I'm gonna die.
I'm trying to get on the helicopter. I'm trying to get in.
I'm holding him back. I'm
Rochelle,
holding him back.
we don't care about Rochelle.
Bye, Rochelle.
Bye, Rochelle.
L for the homie.
But yeah, speaking of being removed from your campus, I guess something that we kind
Rochelle.
Rest in peace, Rochelle.
We loved her there.
yes, Armored Chef as Nick, Adam Smith as Coach, the real OJ32 as Ellis.
Yep, classic actors. Classic
deaths. 0 deaths.
0 deaths. Rochelle takes the L with the 2.
Kinda sus, not gonna lie.
But to kind of like your removal from university or uni, as they say. Go ahead and throw us in another game, I guess, if we have time. You have time, Adam?
Yeah.
Oh, I got like 5 minutes.
Okay, it's fine.
Well,
We can stay in the lobby.
We'll just
Finish
sit in
it
the
off with a
lobby
bit of convo and
then. Yeah. Go ahead and like, I think you told me way back you had an interaction with like the police. How'd that turn out?
Oh, I completely forgot to tell that story.
Yeah, me too, actually. My bad.
I'm gonna have to use some interesting words here. Look, I doubt they're gonna clip this podcast and then use this in court against me. But I'm not taking chances after what I've been through. I may or may not have attended a protest during lockdown, which is illegal.
And that translates to you were not there. So yeah, you didn't go to a protest. 100% did not. Was not there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
this
may
is a
or may not.
hypothetical imagination.
And I may or may not have been very excited by the sheer amount of people that were at the protest, and then did a very, very dumb thing and posted about it on social media. That post was then found by the communists, or may not have been found by the communists, which I infiltrated in, because one of them added me on Facebook, and then seen and then reported to the police. So I'm just chilling at my family's house, and then at 10 p.m. at night, we hear this knock on the door, right? Not a little, gentle knock, but these 3 thudding, massive knocks. Bang, bang, bang. Me and Dad sort of walk out there, and there's 2 police officers armed at our door at 10 o'clock at night. Now, for you guys, the fact that they're armed might not be a massive surprise or anything, but remember, in Australia, we have no firearms. No one ever uses firearms. No one I know has ever seen a firearm, So this is both my first interaction with guns and with police, and they're threatening us. And so I'm like, okay. They knock on the door, start chatting to us, start interrogating me. Were you at this protest? Were you doing this? Who else do you know? Yada, 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 yada. And I respond to them, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment. This sort of goes on for about 15 minutes. They're there trying to intimidate us, right? They've waited till it's 10 o'clock at night. They've rocked up 2 of them, armed, banging on the door, trying to intimidate me to essentially not go to another protest, do anything like that. And I think the fines for going to a protest are like $5,000 or $10,000 at the time. And so they go, we're going to issue you a fine. I said no comment to all their questions, 'cause I don't have a lawyer present or anything. And so essentially me and my dad, who was also there, we just start not yelling at them, but very forcefully talking to them. How can you do this? How can you? But they're paying us really well. We don't really care. So we sort of chew them out for another 20 to 25 minutes, talking back at them. And eventually they leave, and my fine never ends up coming. Doesn't come in. I'm not sure if we made them guilty, or the gods protecting me and it didn't come through, or that they knew we'd take them to court and fight them and they'd take forever. But the fine never, ever came, despite them interrogating me and trying to essentially intimidate like an 18-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm. It's probably the case that, they just use that fine as like an intimidation tactic. Like, because here's the thing, they probably had no actual proof. They said, yeah, we saw you at the protest. But, what proof do they actually have,
Well,
like, they didn't have any
post.
photos, they didn't have any videos of you,
Yeah. Well, there was a photo on the Facebook thing. It got reported by the communists, and that's how they initially found it. I think essentially what happened is because I deleted the post, like, the next day, that they saved the post themselves, so they had no evidence against me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why they dropped it. But at the time, the fines were technically illegal because they can't fine you for this because we have protections under common law and these international treaties we signed. But with that new bill that just passed, they can do whatever they want. So now, like, it's a 10K fine for not wearing a mask in a thing. So I am most certainly much more cautious about where I go and what I do and whether or not, because the fines are massive.
Yeah, I can tell. Because, Australian dollars are, like, at least in comparison to the United States dollar, is, like, more in terms of, like, it costs more to buy, something in Australian dollars than it does United States dollars. So 10,000 is definitely a hefty price for just not wearing a mask,
Yeah, 10,000 Australian dollars is 7,200 US.
Christ, man.
Yeah.
Talk about a markup.
But no.
Yeah,
Economic situations here are continuing to deteriorate because, of course, there's labour shortages everywhere because they're firing tons of people who are unvaxxed. Particularly, like, they've been talking about how our medical system is overwhelmed. It's so bad. It's horrible. And then they're firing hundreds of nurses who refuse to get vaxxed.
Man.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Okay, buddy.
Yeah, that sounds really terrible. That, like, socially, politically, economically, everything seems to be going down the drain. But
we got one shot at this next election, but I'm telling you, if we don't win, if nothing changes, then we're out of here because we just can't live here anymore. We're getting out before they start separating the unvaccinated into special camps.
yeah,
Bro,
They're
come
built-
to Brazil. We love you. Come to Brazil.
Exactly, beautiful Brazil. Well, I mean, they've